Good morning, everybody. Hard to believe that we are up to April 1st tomorrow. No jokes, no nothing. I'm still waiting for official spring, and I do have a very old friend, not only because he and I are no longer kids, but God knows how long I have known you, Bill St. John, and you all know him. Good morning, Bill.
Hi, Pat. Morning to you.
You are well known as restaurant critic, wine writer, everything in the world, recipe writer, and now you have something new. I'm going to let you tell everybody, but I have to say I am beyond impressed. So go.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that very much. To start at the end, I've just launched a new website called billstjohn.com, and it's live. And I'll tell you a little bit more about it, but I do want to say that, and this is, I was thinking about this yesterday, Gabby. You, in fact, are indirectly responsible for this website.
Is that good or bad?
No, it's good because
Did I
do
do?
you remember on your shows, the radio talk shows that you used to have, you'd have a winemaker on and you'd ask that person, how many cases of wine do you produce a year, and keep
Right.
that number in mind, and then the listeners would try to guess as they went through the show,
Absolutely.
and the
I,
person that got closest to that number would win some sort of prize, like a
right.
restaurant coupon or something like that. Or you'd have a restaurateur on and you'd ask him or her, how many bottles of wine do you have in your wine cellar? Keep that number, and then so forth and so on. Well, once you had me on the show, I don't know if I was on with Imbergamo or not, but I was coming down to the mics, and I was thinking, well, what could she possibly ask me? Because I don't have a wine cellar, I don't produce wine, I don't run a restaurant, I don't have services, I can't tell you how many menu items I have, et cetera, et cetera. So I thought to myself, well, I'll try to figure out how many articles I've written since I started writing in March of 1983. It's precisely 40 years ago.
Or we are giving away our age.
Yeah, we are giving away our age. I'm 73 in a couple of weeks. That's it. That's all.
I can't, that's a child for me.
Yeah. Anyway, so I went and I looked at all sorts of sources like hard drives and floppy disks that I had in those days. And this was maybe 4 or 5 years ago on your show. I can't remember exactly, but it was a while ago. Not long, but
Long enough. It was
long enough. Anyway, so
pre-COVID.
yeah, and I moved to Chicago in 2002, started writing for the Chicago Tribune. I'd written for a bunch of magazines around the country, and for the Rocky Mountain News for some 20 years, Microsoft for 2.5 years, the Denver Post for 2 years, on and on and on. I have lots of publications that I fed over the years. And I calculated that I had something along the lines of close to 5,000 articles that I'd written since March of 1983. And it was like 4,732 or something like that.
Yeah, we won't call you a liar for 5,000.
At that time. But it was hard to calculate because the web wasn't really alive in 1983 when I started writing. So blah blah blah. But when I left the Denver Post this last year, at the end of this last year, I didn't want to write my column any longer. It took me too much time, too much effort, 8 to 20 hours a week just to do that column for very little money. There's no money in print publication anymore.
True.
I thought to myself, after talking with some people, some friends and so forth, I've got 5,000 pieces of content that I could put online if I created a website and used it in that fashion. And that number came to me because of that exercise that I did when I was going on to your show. Do you understand what I'm getting at here?
I'm very flattered.
And it was nice. Well, it's nice for me to know that. I mean, I have written that much. That's close to 5 million words, which for a Dusty Saunders or a Mike Royko or something isn't that much, but it's pretty good. It's a pretty good. It's a lot.
Yeah.
So what I've done is I packaged a lot of that. There's stuff that goes back many years, 20, 30 years. And then there's new stuff that's only a couple years old or a year old. Or I just put something on the other day that was brand new.
I saw.
So I put these things on my website, billstjohn.com, which the nickname of which is Get Cooking with Bill St. John. And there are different categories. Like there's a whole section of recipes, which I think there's only about 50 there now, but I have to put, a couple more hundred, right? And there's a whole section on
History.
wine. There's some videos that I got that we made at the Denver Post that are on YouTube. So like kind of in the public domain, I can link to them. There's stuff about ingredients that are stories about ingredients, which I just love to write about. There's a whole bunch about the histories of food, different food histories, which of course I love writing about. People like reading that. And all of this is on this website, Bill St. John.
And then you have a whole section on wine.
Yeah.
Because I just pulled it up to look at that. I found the others fascinating. But the wine, you just click away, and if I'm drinking blah, 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 Malbec, and you explain it so well, the taste, the terroir, what it's going to do. I mean, the web, I don't know who, if anyone helped you. But
no, well, Joe Rassafas is a great friend of mine, and he's a former editor of mine from the Rocky, and he and I have been captaining this, but he's a great coach, and he's a great organizer. He was my boss over at sidewalk.com when we worked for Microsoft, and Joe's helped me a great deal. But
well, your pictures and the way you can, I'm just saying this as not you who wrote it, but I'm the guy that goes in and, what do I know? Right. And it's beautifully laid out.
Thank you very, very much.
If I go to a web page and it says recipe, I want to be able to find it. And it is no trouble. I mean, I have never seen a better web page.
Oh, that's I really appreciate that. I wanted to make it user friendly. I'm in charge of I designed the whole thing. I used this website design thing called Squarespace, and so I appreciate the compliments because it reflects on my aesthetic senses. But so there it is. I wanted to explain a little bit about the title, Get Cooking with Bill St. John. I took it from the column that I named at the Denver Post, which was called Get Cooking. And it has a double meaning. On the one hand, it's like, that phrase that we have, get it? Do you get it? Like, let's get or understand or educate ourselves more about cooking. So here is a website that helps you get cooking, but it's also an exhortation. Hey, let's get cooking. Get cooking. Cook for yourself, cook for your family, cook for your friends. And so that's why I repurposed that title.
I thought it was just a great title anyway.
Well,
I'm going to tell you my one problem with the whole website.
Please.
The only thing it didn't have is Bill St. John isn't cooking for Gabby. That was the only thing I could find wrong. Is I searched all over and there was nothing.
I don't even know if I ever cooked for you. I can't remember that I have, actually.
I don't think so.
No.
I've been around cooking with you for 40 years.
Yeah, right.
I hate to say that.
40 years is 40 years.
Yeah, it's 40 short years. The one thing, like you might tell people, is this week, and as you open the web page, it was like lamb for Easter and something for Passover. Like it's up to date.
Right. I want to. Yeah. The idea, and this is more Joe's idea than mine, and I appreciate it because of that. The idea is to refresh that page every week.
Well, so that's what I thought. Yeah.
And has recipes that are appropriate for the season and also targeted for maybe a theme or an idea. For example, I think what I'm going to do 2 weeks from next Wednesday, well, a week and a half from now, is to do some stuff on recipes that utilize ham, leftover ham, because I have a feeling that a lot of people will have ham on April 9th, Easter Sunday. And, that famous phrase of Dorothy Parker's that her definition of eternity is 2 people and a ham, that's the idea.
Are you going to have leftover brisket recipes for the Jewish people?
For my Jewish friends? I think about that. I love I go to Seder every year as at some close friends, and I love that experience. I make the horseradish or the maror or grain.
Right.
They get the goy to cry the tears of the children of Israel, and because I make it from scratch, they love
I
my.
would too. And how
Yeah.
many cries do you have doing that?
One thing I have to do now, I have to go outside, and when I add the white vinegar, because the fumes are so strong, I
That's
can't
what
eat.
I'm saying. It's
Yeah,
horrible.
it's really. I wore swimming goggles once, but it snuck in on the
I
side.
tried. Well, as a nice Jewish girl, I gave up making it for Lent
Oh,
because it
really?
killed my eyes.
Yeah, no, it's super strong. That's why they like what I make. So, you know,
Well, I'll stop by and get some for Gabby, except there's nobody here, so it doesn't matter. I go out too now.
that's good.
No more cooking. So I know the history I found incredibly interesting about different Mexican or whatever you're thinking about and ingredients. I think most of us have no clue. You see a package, what it really is.
Well, we haven't been taught that, and we haven't been encouraged to think about that. And because I mean, literally, it's been prepackaged for us
Right.
and sort of delivered to us that way. I always think that the saddest thing in the market is the pieces of meat underneath their little cellophane packages with on their diapers, soaking up the animal blood. Um, it would be nice if we knew that where that came from, how that came to us that way, just so we were more in touch with the sources of our food. But that is a metaphor for all the kind of stuff that we buy in many respects. And so what I write about when I write about ingredients is usually about, like, I'll do a whole piece on garlic. Where, what's it about? How does it grow? What myths surrounded it? What's its history? Why was it looked down upon in the Middle Ages? Why is it popular now? What's the point about it in terms of its, historical development as a food item or a food ingredient? And I do that with, I've done that with the beet, with potato, with tomato, with
Okay.
cilantro,
I did not look, but here is a question. I don't know the answer. I've been
Sure.
doing it for years. And I ask everybody, of course, no one knows the answer. Well, you might. Why would anybody taste and try to eat that first artichoke?
Oh,
But
yeah. Or
it's there. I mean, who would think I'm going to take this prickly, awful thing and make one of the best things in the world from it?
right. I mean, that's a very, very good question. Who was it? I think it was Mary Frances K. Fisher who said, "'Twas a brave man who first ate the oyster."
Okay, same
You
thing.
know, same thing. Here's this thing that looks like well, I call them cold boogers and shells. You know, it's like, why would
And
somebody?
everyone I know would really want to taste one if they never have.
Yeah, well, but I think if you look back on history, it's really interesting to note. Um, I mean, why didn't people die from eating so many things? Well, they did actually. They would eat some poisonous plant and croak, and their neighbors would say, "Well, I'm not going to eat that if that's what happens to me." So, I mean, there's a huge history, thousands of years probably, but at least several hundreds of years of experimentation with plants that we just find growing wild. Um, Asparagus is a grass that grows wild all over Europe and East Asia. I mean, West Asia. And so it's like, why would you eat this bitter stalk that has fibers all through it? Or let's let's try to eat it and see if we don't die or get sick from it, and then figure out ways over time to how to cook it, how to soften it,
Right.
how to make it more palatable. I just finished an article for UC Health on celery. There's one recipe that uses a lot of celery because it's very popular at Passover time and Easter time. Sometimes on Seder plates, you'll see celery leaves instead of parsley leaves. But there was my mother used to love try to buy this celery called Pascal celery, Paschal. And I found it interesting. What's the Easter connection? Because that's an Easter word.
Yeah.
That word means Easter. Well, it's a misspelling of the word Pascal, which
Right.
was an Italian fellow who came to this country, to this state, and devised a way of growing this bitter, fibrous vegetable by wrapping it with newspaper, burying it in the ground, in the mounds of like the asparagus mounds almost for almost 3 months, and it was 2.5 months, and it blanched it so that it was not green. It didn't get any sunlight, so it didn't turn green. It didn't get fibrous that way, and it was much more tender and sweet than the celery that we know traditionally.
Okay.
And it came to be called Pascal, Pascal celery, after this
Right.
guy's name. Colorado was a major exporter of it around the country. It was very popular, just like we were the biggest iceberg lettuce producers for years. I don't know if people know that, but up in
Yeah.
near Avon and so forth, there were these truck farms that grew iceberg lettuce, and then they ship it to Minturn and ship it down here in these boxes full of ice, and I think that's where it got its name. But the point is, this Pascal celery wouldn't have been around at Easter time, because it'd be seedlings in the greenhouse, and it would come around in late September when it was finished growing. That's what Pascal celery is. This Pascal is sort of a misspelling and a misconception, but I still I wrote that story down and published a recipe that uses that celery, just in honor of this idea that we used to search for Easter celery, like the Jews would use that celery for Seder meals,
Right.
Seder plates, and so I think it's just. But these are the stories I love about food, and why. Like, how did this guy figure out if you wrap it in newspaper and bury it in the ground, it'll be tenderer and sweeter than the other? Well, he just probably experimented with something. He figured if your plant doesn't get chlorophyll, doesn't accentuate its chlorophyll, it's not going to get, So we've done this as human beings all through history with many, many different kinds of foods. And I agree. I mean, why would you
Who
eat
would pick up an artichoke and eat it?
They're ugly. They're hurt. You can hurt yourself on the spines.
Well, will you do a story on that? Because
that's a good idea. Thank you. It's a very good suggestion, actually.
I have asked 1 million people. And
I'm writing down that idea right now. So I think that's a splendid idea.
The thing is, Gabby, you're crazy. Whatever gave you that thought? And I said, well, somebody had to eat it first, and why? Right. And I frankly, right now, for what little you've told me, because we did a lot of background on you too, I have decided, and you're going to have to say yes, that would be great, that once every 6 or 8 weeks, you are going to come on, because I think when people see this and can hear the story of the celery or whatever you're doing, whether you're ready for May or, Mexican food's one thing, but summer things and all the great vegetables and things.
Yeah. Great idea. Let's do that. I promise you, I'll do the research on the artichoke thing, write it up, put it on my website, and then I'll come on to this thing and we'll record it, and people will learn about why did somebody first eat an artichoke.
I have asked that question forever.
Yeah, I think it's a good one. And it talks about our psychology of eating, doesn't it?
Yeah. The oyster is very interesting, but and asparagus, sort of, but the artichoke, I just can't believe.
Yeah. Well, we would eat, we human beings would just eat plants because we needed nourishment. And I suppose it was a question of experimentation. And once you got past the spines, once you got past the thistle, you figured out if you boiled it or something and you didn't eat that thing in the center that would choke your throat, it was pretty tasty. So, and
that you just scraped off with your tongue one end, not all of it. Come on, there's a lot of work to learn.
Oh, no. Well, first of all, lobsters were poor people's food in the turn when our country was founded. There were waves of lobsters up on the northeast coast, and they would just get washed up on the beaches. And wealthy people, the George Washingtons of the world, they didn't eat lobster because they considered it poor man's food.
Sure.
But how do you eat? I mean, who figured out how to eat an effing lobster? You know,
You're allowed to say it on the show, but don't.
Yeah, I understand. The Catholic boy.
Yeah, well, I just always think from radio day, somebody's going to throw me off. However, that is fascinating. And that, I mean, that's a great subject we should talk about. Another thing that, you know, my husband, Mark, was in the cattle business.
Ah, that's right.
Obviously, we're going back years. They used to bring home short ribs because it was the cheapest cut of meat that no one wanted. And now it's the most expensive, hard to get, blah, blah, blah. I mean, what makes that this now when nobody wanted it?
Well, they're choices that people, you know, come and go with. The tougher pieces of meat were always less expensive than the leaner pieces of meat. I think people actually that can't afford it look down at filet mignon and tenderloin and so forth. You know, what's the point? Because it doesn't have much flavor.
I totally agree with
compared to these other things. So,
frankly, I agree with them. But I mean, just do all this, keep doing it. And even like simple things, make a recipe, show a hamburger that isn't like every other hamburger. I mean, people are dying for that now because I know you know that people are eating more at home because things are so expensive. And I think we all are. I loved I thought, I'll look at the page. And there I was for hours going through all this stuff. And I think people want to know that.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate
Unfortunately for me, I have friends who cook because I don't. Well, you are doing a phenomenal job. Now, tell everybody this will come up. You don't have to pay to get on the page or anything.
No, I'm not going to charge anything for newsletters or anything like that either. I decided this. I mean, I have those 5,000 articles that I came about because I was on your show and I had to think about it. So I shipped them over. I'm shipping them over to the web, packaging them on different categories, and I'm not interested in charging for it.
No, I don't. I understand. I'm with you all the way.
So.
You are doing the best service, and usually I just let my guests talk. But I really want people to know that this is something you really should look at and enjoy.
Oh, that's really sweet of you, Pat.
And
Thanks
you have a contact page to send things you would like to know.
Yeah, people can write me at my email there, bill@billstjohn.com. There's lots of clickings on the bottom pages. Just click on that and send me your email address, and or you can ask questions. People have sent questions along the lines of why did a person first eat an artichoke in different subject matters to me already in the last 3 or 4 weeks.
Good.
You know, like, hey, what about why did, you know, and that. So I appreciate that. And also feedback on some of the recipes. There was a confusing recipe that I published the other day to some gentleman in Michigan. And so I clarified it for him and then, you know, fixed the page on the site.
Sure.
So very helpful suggestion for me to be better for other people as well. So, yeah.
So all in all, go to Bill St. Tell him everything.
Yeah, just go to billstjohn.com, BILLSTJOHN.com, and you'll be at my site.
And I will be a regular. You've been a great friend all these years and so talented. This is incredible. And everybody who is watching, please go to YouTube, TheGabb, it's GABB, and you'll see this, others, and it will be on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And Bill, I'm very sorry, you are going to have to be, like it or not, a regular and just have you just tell me in like 6 weeks when you'll have to be back.
Yeah, we'll figure something out. We'll figure out a rough schedule like that every 6 months or so or something, whatever. No, every 6 weeks, whatever.
Yeah, 6 weeks. We'll age too much.
Yeah.
Right. And to you, have a very happy Easter and enjoy your weekend. Stay well. And I just can't rave enough. You are great.
Thanks, sweetheart. Thanks very much.
Much
We've
love.
had a nice relationship all these years, and you and all of your Jewish friends have a very blessed Passover too. I'm going to have a nice Seder like I do every year with my close Jewish friends. So
Good for you. Much, and I'll have Easter ham.
all right.
Love you. Have a great week, and thank
yeah.
you all. Be well.